Hauntcast.
Haunting Halloween and horror.
Interviews with haunting gurus.
He's a production designer and a special makeup effects artist working in the movie and haunted attraction industry, which includes the Bates Motel and Haunted Hayride, for over 16 years. It's Shawn Sieger.
Hey, Shawn, what's going on? Hey, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Long-time listener.
We met a couple of times at Trans World over the years. I don't go every year, but you usually catch me with my hetero life partner there, Johnny Thunder. You know Johnny. Bubba.
Bubba's great.
You have an intimate makeup relationship with Bubba over the years.
Oh, I've had my fingers all over his face.
Yuck. What we're going to do is just jump into the Wayback Machine, and we'll go way, way back to when little Shawn had his beginnings in haunting. How did this crazy journey begin?
That's actually kind of funny that you said it that way, because it did start when I was a child. I imagine most of us that are into this are in the same boat, in that like our fathers let us watch a bunch of horror movies we never should have watched at the age we were watching them.
Yeah, no, was your dad, I talked to JT a little bit before I got on with you. Was your dad like really into this stuff, like into Halloween or horror movies and stuff like that?
Not as a profession, but like as a hobbyist. My father was an amazing artist. So like all of his friends would ask him to do their makeup, because like back then that wasn't, no internet and all. People didn't really have the same access they do now to discover this stuff. But him just being an amazing artist took right to it. And then once he had kids, it was always like a fun thing that they made us up. Like I was the Hulk when I was 4 years old, and my father, painted my whole face and hands green and black hair and the whole thing,
So was he doing anything at the house? Were you guys doing any kind of haunt when you were younger, or like how did
No. That's kind of funny. My mother now, she used to I don't know, she had, four children, 3 boys and a girl, and she would sometimes hide and scare us. And I don't know how that started, because I was so young, but it got to a point where my brother and I were doing it in outrageous fashion. She's like, okay, it's all got to stop. And then at one time, I know I was coming out of my bedroom door, and my brother had shimmied himself all the way up to the ceiling, putting his hands and feet on the hallway walls. And he thought he was just going to scare me, but he was sitting there so long waiting to scare me that he fell on top of me. Scared the life out of me. That's how intense it got.
So you guys had this little running thing in your family where you try to get each other?
Yeah, mainly my mother, my brother Robert, and myself. And then one year at Halloween, and we were still kids, my brother Rob and myself asked my mom if we could give out the candy. And she's like, wait, you don't want to go trick-or-treating? And we're like, no, we want to give out the candy. And she's like, but it's Halloween. You don't want to go get candy? And we're like, no. So she thought that was really odd. So she let us. She gave us the bowl, and we're sitting out on the stoop. And we had a brick pillar out there. And my brother was dressed as a Grim Reaper. And he stood up on the pillar and acted like a statue, like most people's first scare, right? And as the kids came up to get the candy from me, he'd swing the sickle down up over their heads and scare the hell out of them, Mm-hmm. So that was our introduction to this. And my mom's just in the house laughing oh, that's what they wanted to do. Okay.
Yeah, that was the hit of crack that you needed, right? Or that you probably didn't need. But once you get those first couple of scares out of somebody, even the first time, you just it is something that you kind of always are trying to chase that feeling. I always call it chasing the dragon. You always try to chase that initial feeling that you got the first time you scared somebody, or you had a really amazing startle scare from somebody. So that's cool. How old were you guys?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Okay, it was that
we were
young.
Still trick-or-treating age, so it's before, got to be like before seventh grade,
Like
know,
preteen kind of thing.
yeah. So
Yeah.
my brother's 2 years younger than I am. So like, I don't know, what was he? Maybe 9 and I was 11, maybe.
Okay.
I don't really remember.
Yeah. So then what happened from there? You guys did that one Halloween. Did you follow it up each year?
No. It was like we did it the one time and it was fun. And I can't remember if we did it again because, like I said, we were young doing that kind of thing. But I remember there was a house that we went to trick or treating one year, and the guy had a table with a tablecloth so you couldn't see under it, and he had a hole cut out and his head on the table. And I thought that was great. And I loved the idea, the theatrics behind that. I was like, oh, it's more than just, the us being scary. Like, you can create a set. There's a theatrics behind it, So, like, that was, I don't know if I had the language for it as a kid, but I remember being really impressed by that. And then really impressed by, like so many people my age, Dracula's Castle in Wildwood. So having gone to that as a child.
Yeah, a lot of people mention that as being an inspiration for them. People who were from that area, of course.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So you had your exposure to a haunt and loved it.
Yeah, and then in high school, I went to Roman Catholic, and as part of our curriculum, we had to do community service with the Catholic high school, and I got involved with a charitable haunted attraction run out of Byberry Institution, which had been closed, and they were raising money for drug rehabilitation programs. So as my community service, I wound up working for a haunted house. And then I got the bug. That was my senior year, I think, in high school. It was either my junior or senior, but I think it was my senior year in high school. And that kind of got the bug. And I was like, okay, this is something I want to do. But at that time, I didn't even know as a business that people were doing this for profit at all. Because this was back in the, was it 91, 92,
Yeah, it was still probably in the tail end of the JC's haunts and stuff like that were, all those charitable things that were out there. You thought, oh, this is amazing. I'd love to do more of this, but didn't think there was a pathway to do it.
Yeah, I didn't know that there was any kind of path to making money at it. But what wound up happening was I think I did that for 2 years, and then a couple years later, in my early 20s, my brother and I started doing a home haunt. And one of the things I did is I remembered that table with the head on it where the actor, had his head through the table. But I was like, well, I got to one-up it. So I built one with a mirror underneath so that you could actually look underneath, and would scare my neighbors and anyone who would come to our house. And we had I had a 2-car driveway and a basement, and we'd do one room in the basement and do up the driveway. And that, people started traveling to our house. We did that for five or six Halloweens.
Now, where do you live? Where was the house? I mean,
Northeast Philadelphia.
Okay. All right. So you did it for 5-6 years or
yeah,
so?
5 or 6 years, something like maybe. Yeah, I think 6 years.
Okay.
And so during that time, then I think is when during that time is when I first started getting online and starting, to see other people were doing similar things. But again, the internet was young, so it wasn't, what you could find now.
You had to get on AOL, wait for the for 10 minutes to get connected so you could get online.
Exactly. And your landline is busy the whole time you're online, right?
Get off the phone! I'm trying to get online.
But one of the things that led to was finding I want to say it was the Horror Find convention in Baltimore. So then Rob and I traveled down to see that, and at the time, I think that has become more geared toward movie fans with celebrities, but I could be wrong. But at the time when that had started, we had it was a lot of home haunters and some celebrity like movie people. Like I remember Bruce Campbell hosted the one Halloween party, and like so there would be some celebrities and stuff there, but it was mainly for haunters back then. So then our home haunts were getting better, and then one year we decided to try to make some tombstones because all you could really find at that time were foam tombstones, and when the wind hit them, they shook and they were small, and I was never really happy with that. So we invested some money into some tools and particle board and poplar to make a bunch of tombstones that ranged from like 3 feet all the way up to 6 feet tall. And they were all carved and painted and heavy as hell. So when they sat outside, the wind didn't move them. And we decided to make a bunch of them and try to sell them. So we got a vendor's table at the Horrifying convention and set up, and we're not able to sell a single one. We raffled one off. There was like an Alfred Hitchcock homage tombstone. And that was the only one we were able to get rid of. The rest of them we had to take back. But it was great though, because everyone said how much they loved them. I think we were like a little bit ahead of the curve. Nobody came with trucks back then. And because they were so heavy, the shipping would cost more than the tombstone.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now, how did you end up carving the epitaphs and stuff on there? What did you
Dremel.
Just a Dremel? Okay, kind of like what people do with the foam ones, but you were doing them on wood.
So we would do the face and the back out of particle board, so it would carve easier with a Dremel, and then do like the bases with poplar or pine 2x.
How much were you selling them for? Do you even remember?
Between $100 and $340, I think.
Oh, okay. So they were, I guess what was this in the early 90s? Mid 90s?
Later 90s.
Okay.
Mid to late 90s. Yeah, I guess it was later.
Late 90s. Okay.
Was it early? Now I'm trying to remember. It was either late 90s or the very beginning of the 2000s. Might have been like 2002.
All right.
And we only did it 1 year because luckily we had bought some DVDs and life casts of actors, and we had a couple candy machines. So it didn't cost us anything for our booth. Like we did make that money back and stuff, but not on the tombstones other than the one we sold or we raffled off. But yeah, because a lot of people said they loved them. A lot of people were interested in them. And then when we figured out what the shipping was going to be, they're like, oh, no way, So, but that directly led to the first haunt that we worked for that was a profitable, like for-profit haunt. Someone in our area had heard about this, and they were opening up a haunt. So Rob and I worked for the Scare Brothers haunted house for 3 seasons. They had heard about us and contacted us. And so that led directly to us working in the industry, like for real versus like what I was doing in high school.
They heard about you from being at that venting at that convention.
Yes.
And then and then you guys hooked up and you started working for them.
Yeah, and they hired us they only had 2 makeup artists, which was my brother and myself. And we also did their art department. So like we were the whole art department because they were a beginning haunt. It was a smaller haunt than like the Bates or something like that today. So we were their art department, including makeup. And we did that for 3 seasons. And during those 3 seasons, we got out to the Bates Motel just to see it. And that was like my first experience there. And then after having seen that, my brother and I talked about it, and we were like, I think we might want to work there. So in a couple of years, I think we might have saw it like our first year even. And then a couple of years later, we went down and talked to Randy about working for him. And so then I've been at the Bates ever since. And I think that was think I started there in 2006.
So you just basically just went down there and said, "Hey, we want to work for you, Randy." That's kind of, and then he brought you on.
Yeah, we came with like a whole portfolio. Like when we saw the Bates Motel, we were like, "Oh, these guys are on another level," you know. So we wanted to be a part of that. So we put together like pictures of everything we had done, all props that we had built, all sets, makeups, and we put together a portfolio and, reached out to him. He said, come on down. We met with him, showed him our work, and he hired us.
And you worked for him for about 16 years?
Well, so no. So I was a production designer for about 16 years, but I started there in 2006. So the upcoming season will be my 20th season there.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Because you did obviously come in and you weren't like running things when you walked in the door. Yeah. So what were you doing when you first got in there? You were doing makeup.
So we did makeup, and he took us right in as part of his art department. So we the first year we did a couple sets, and we did makeup with a couple other people. Marissa Giammatteo and Chris Polito and Robert Sieger and myself. It was just the four of us my first year there doing makeup. Like now they have a makeup crew that reaches like 20 people on a busy night. But when I started there 20 years ago, it's just the four of us.
So it was pretty intense.
Yeah, it was. But it was a lot of fun, and it was great, all around great people working there from then till now. So it's a special place, and it's been a lot of fun over the years.
Just so before we get too far into it, so when you and your brother were originally learning to do makeup, like because you really weren't finding anything, the internet really wasn't a thing at that point, right? Or it was probably in its infancy. Yeah. So how did you two kind of figure it out? Like, any materials? Like, did you buy any books, or was there anything available? Oh
yeah, there were not a ton, but I think Tom Savini had a book out about molds and makeup, and there was another theater prop making and mold making book I know I had. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, so we sought out some books. And we were lucky enough that there was I think it was called Magic Castle, which is now gone. But that was a place that rented out costumes. And specifically to magicians and clowns, they had a whole bunch of makeup. Because back then, like you had them cheap cream makeups that you could buy. And when they dried, they like cracked. Mm-hmm. They didn't have like the nice creams that you would get from Ben Nye or Maron or any of those in normal stores or in Halloween stores that would pop up. But this place was a theatrical store, and they catered to clowning and magicians. So they had the nice Maron sticks, and just to give you an idea, like this is going back over 20. Like this is while I was growing up. So you're talking like well over 30 years ago, and the price has probably only gone up like $3 or $4 on those sticks from then till now, because back then it was a specialty item. Like now it's more readily available, so it's like now they can sell them cheaper, which means like the price hasn't changed much. But back then it was a specialty item, so they were really expensive, But
so you guys got your hold on some good makeup.
Yeah.
And were you practicing on yourselves?
Yes.
Is that how you were doing it? Like you would do Rob, and Rob would do you, and
no, we would do ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
There was definitely. I find this with a lot of makeup artists, and like as you get into the profession of movies and things that take a lot more collaboration, you tend to let go of it because you have to. But like I think there's like a little bit of ego. Like you'd hate to be an artist and somebody asks who did your makeup, and you gotta be like, my brother. So I think like the ego attached, like it's like, oh, I did my makeup,
You were practicing on yourselves, basically.
Yes.
doing your own makeup, and that's how you kind of cut your teeth on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like going back to you saying there not being an internet, the first time we tried to do, now it wasn't me, so I don't want to take the blame for this, but my father and my brother decided to do a life cast of my brother's face. And they had read about death casts. So like they didn't know about alginate. And back then there was no silicone for making a mold of somebody's face. Like that wasn't even a thing yet. And they weren't aware of alginate because the limited access to books that we had, like that wasn't a substance we had come across yet. But we had read about people taking death masks and death casts from famous people throughout the years, and they would just do it by putting plaster on somebody's face. Well, when somebody's dead, that's not a problem, because if you break something, there's no issue there. But your face does have some undercuts, and the plaster locked on to my brother's, the ridge of his nose, the bone there, and it broke when the plaster came off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So learned that one the hard way.
Shit. You had to learn that, and it was a little bit more the hard way because there wasn't really much available out there. And now, what can't you find online? What can't you find on YouTube? Plus, there's you can go there's schools you can go to. You can buy DVDs. If you stream things, you can probably log in, and they do like Udemy and all these other places probably have special makeup, artists doing makeup shops and stuff that you can just kind of buy the course. And where would you recommend that if somebody wanted to get into this today, where would you recommend they begin their journey?
Well, so today, like even the amount of books that are out there and available, like the Tom Savini book I was talking about, Grand Illusions, like that's still a great book, so you can always go to that. There's another book out, Special Makeup Effects for Stage and Screen, Making and Applying Prosthetics. That's a really good book. Mike Spatola has the Monstrous Makeup Manual, and I think there's like 3 books in that series, and they're great books. And then if you have a little bit of money to invest, on Black Friday and around Christmas, and I think there's another time during the year when it goes on sale, a subscription to Stan Winston Studios' School Online. It's not like a school, but like all their videos are, I can't tell you how valuable, even as a professional in the field. Like if you want to know how professionals are doing things, like as a professional, I still lean on that. Like if I'm not sure or have a question, I can look up their courses online. You have to have a subscription, so you do pay like for a yearly subscription to have access to that. But it's so worth it if you're like really trying to get into it.
So it's worth a few bucks to just buy the subscription. And you can, like I say, there's a couple times a year where you can get discounts on the subscription.
Yeah, I want to say it's like up to 40% off too, which is really nice. I want to say it's like around Christmas and or it might be specifically Black Friday. I'm not sure, but they run really nice sales, but it's only a couple times a year. But once you subscribe at that price, if you maintain it, that's your price.
Yeah, it locks you in.
Yeah, so every year that's what you're paying. So it's like I said, invaluable how much information they have out there. And then YouTube, there's so many people. The biggest problem with YouTube is you don't know the credentials of the person who's giving you the information. So like I have seen things where people are using acrylic paints on skin, which you really shouldn't be doing. Your skin needs to breathe. You want to use a makeup. I've seen things where people are like, do the scissors in the face, and they just kind of cut through scissors and they don't dull them properly and glue them to people and stuff. So like YouTube has some amazing people on there, but you really need to just be wary of the safety of what some people are sharing.
It's for somebody like me who I'm not looking to get into like doing makeup, but I do I build my own props, and I want to get better at painting masks and my creatures. The techniques are somewhat similar, but you're using different types of paint. Would that be correct?
Yes, if you're getting into airbrushing, specifically, then absolutely. The techniques are almost exactly the same. It's just using different types of paint, different types of thinner, different ways of cleaning your airbrush. But then the techniques really do translate. You're using the same tool to apply. Now, when you're talking about putting on like a theatrical cream makeup, that's totally different than how you would paint a prop. It's almost like oil painting versus acrylic painting if you're an artist, or watercolor. Mm-hmm. Like the different mediums dictate, how you have to apply the paint. So a cream makeup, like theatrical cream makeups, is different than how you paint a prop. But if you're talking about airbrushing, airbrushing makeup, airbrushing a prop, exact same techniques that you're going to use. And the only major difference would be that on props, you have the flexibility of being able to mask parts to not get paint on them by putting let's say I already painted the eyeballs, let it dry, put your clear coat, let that dry. Then you can put like a latex mask on it. So now you can paint around it and then peel that off, and then your eyeball wasn't hit by what you did around it, which you obviously can't do in a makeup. But the techniques of using the airbrush itself are the same.
I guess I've always thought that, when people are doing makeup, they're only using the airbrush, but you are using either. It probably depends. Does it just depend on the type of character that you're doing, whether you use one type of makeup or the other, whether you use airbrush or using more the cream type? Because you use both? Is that right?
I use both. It depends on the look I'm going for. So there's certain looks I can get out of like if I want to do something more translucent, not that you can't do it. There's so many products out there now. It's like you can do something with everything. Like you have, there's alcohol activated paints and makeups now too. And so even now that's similar again too, because I've painted props with the alcohol activated makeups in a pinch, and it holds on really well. There's a lot of that crosses over, and like airbrushes, I feel like gives you a lot of translucency. It has a clean look. You can do blotchier things with it, and there's different techniques to do that. Like you can do modeling by doing like a veiny technique over things. It's like I think sometimes it just comes down to one, what are you trying to achieve, and two, your experience with the product to get that look. Because I remember when I first started at the Bates, one of the people had experience with an airbrush, and he was like, "Oh, well, airbrushes are quicker," but I had so much experience with creams that like he wasn't any faster with an airbrush than I was at cream. So sometimes it's what what you're used to. You can usually find a way to get the look you're trying to get with the products you're used to.
Do you typically use the creams when you're looking for like bolder color, like kind of kabuki type makeup looks, or you know what I mean? Like where that person is kind of in the shadows, you need the details to stand out more, like putting all fine details that you can't kind of see in that type of scenario. Is that?
I can't say that I have a preference for that. Like I do, okay. I do very bold, contrasty makeups with creams or airbrush, and creams are really nice. Like oil paints, they can blend into each other really nicely. So it's like I can find a way to get subtle makeups out of them as well. I think I feel like for myself, like for instance, like if I want to put a bruise on somebody, I'm not saying you can't do it with an airbrush, but I don't do that with an airbrush. So if I want to do a bruise, I may either use creams or alcohol activated makeups to do bruising. And that's just because that's what I have the experience of doing.
Yeah, so some of it's just preference based on your experience.
Yep, and it's like I used to only do veining by hand with creams or alcohol activated makeups because of how fine the lines can be. Like if I was trying to do cracks, like if I was doing a doll makeup and wanted to paint in the cracks, I didn't want to use like airbrush for that. And maybe something like that tiny, and if you want to be tiny and a hard line, like a crack, I do find myself still picking up a brush specifically for those things as well, whether it's going to be creams or alcohol activated, I don't find, but veining though, I have gone over to airbrushing for some because they have micro airbrushes now. They have people airbrushing like your fingernails, you know what I mean? So they have like these small airbrushes, and then you can still get a little translucency out of that, which you can also get with alcohol activated and creams if you like put it on lightly and tap it down. So there's other ways to get it, but I found like I can do that quicker now with an airbrush. With a micro airbrush or something like that. So I have found myself going back and forth on how I now do veining. But still, will for fine, hard details like cracks on something, I might still lead into something that I'm going to use a brush for.
I'm trying to get better at airbrushing, and I definitely need to, take a course or something, or maybe grab a book or two. I'll definitely take some advice from you and look into trying to, up my game there, because I really would like to get better with it. I've gotten a little bit better over the years, but I'm still lacking, and I need to kind of, I just definitely want to take that skill set, up a level or so. Do you have a preference on airbrushes? What type of airbrush you use, the brands of airbrush that you use,
Iwata's great. I like them. But if you're just getting into it, Iwata can be expensive. I think it's called Eclipse, is a very similar, cheaper version of that. It doesn't, there's a reason it's cheaper. It's not an Iwata, and it's not just the name. Like Iwata is a well-made airbrush. But if you're just starting, like an Eclipse is nice. Like I recommend figuring this stuff out and making your mistakes and learning how to clean it and keep it clean with a cheaper airbrush,
Yeah, I was just having this conversation with somebody not too long ago. I said one of the most important things like that you need to know when you're airbrushing, like when you want to screw around with an airbrush, is that you have to clean the thing out thoroughly every time you use it, because, it's the smallest molecule that will clog that sucker up and completely derail whatever you're trying to do. The cleaning is just as important as the rest of the work that you're doing with it. Am I wrong? I don't know.
No, I know there's some people who say, like, if you have a really good airbrush, that they're workhorses and they rarely clean them. And, they flush them, but they rarely take them apart and clean them. Yeah. I don't. I take mine apart often and try to keep them cleaned out. But here's another thing, too. Like, if you do both props and makeup, you definitely need to take them all the way apart before switching to makeup and clean absolutely everything out of it, because you don't want the paint that you were using, acrylics, whatnot, to be in that airbrush when you're going to start applying makeup onto somebody's face. Okay. So if you can, I'd recommend not even using the same brush for that. Like,
having two separate brushes.
Yeah, the Eclipse brushes are cheap enough where, like, just get a second one. Don't use that one for your paint, and then use it for somebody's face.
Do you have a preference on gravity feed or a siphon feed? Do you like?
I tend to use siphon feed, but I think it's mainly out of laziness, right? I don't want to have to keep adding paint. And a lot of what I do, especially in the haunted attraction industry, like I have a couple gravity feed ones, and I have used them, especially on movies where I'm not doing volume. So like in the haunted attraction industry, I feel like everything I'm doing is in volume. So I tend to use siphon feed for that, so I can put like larger bottles of paint on there.
You're probably using a lot of the same colors over and over again, and you might have to mix up to get a certain color the way you like, to mix a very special color, and then you want to make a batch of that because you're going to be using it constantly, and then you can just screw it in, unscrew it, cap it, put it away, and then grab it the next time you need it.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's like if I'm doing, even if it's just one character that I decide, I like this blue for this character. Well, I'm working in a haunted house. I'm going to paint that person possibly 30 times this month. you know. So I'll make a bottle of it, you know, and then I might find that I like it on other things as well. So I tend to make up, like, if I can, around 12 different colors for doing makeup at the Bates Motel and Haunted Hayride. I'll have like 12 colors sitting there and, you know, cap them, clean out the straws every night and all that. But like having the siphon feed, you know, means like I don't have to do that for every actor that sits down and go through that process, you know, of cleaning out the bowl or, flushing it out. Or, I just like to just switch them off, spray for 3 seconds, flush out the one color into the next, and then right on to the next person, you know.
Now I picked up a Iwata, I think it was like the Neo, and it's the trigger, the trigger action versus the dual act. Now you use primarily the dual action.
Yes.
Brushes,
I've never used the trigger though. How is that?
Well, you're asking a complete novice. So I can't give you any exact. I haven't. I've really only kind of had a trigger. I used to use those Harbor Freight throwaway ones because just when I'm doing more, when I'm going to like do a lot of color, if I'm airbrushing something. Which, once again, I probably could just paint the damn thing on, or I've been screwing around with this. Once again, that's why I really need to get better at this, and I really want to up my airbrush game. And I'm wondering, I bought the trigger, and it's okay, and I think it's just easier for me to grasp the just because it's like one single action versus having to like press down and then press forward with the dual action. I just find that it just seems simpler to me. I need to kind of play with the other and get a better idea of like whether I want to use one or the other. But for like someone like me, it just seemed like the trigger was the way to go, and eventually I could gravitate into the dual action. But do you have any specific brands of paint that you prefer to use versus others?
European Body Arts is really nice. EBA paints, I like them. They have tons of great stuff, and their prices are reasonable. I also like Maron. For creams, I like Maron. Their cream sticks are heavily pigmented. But then for cream foundations, I tend to like Ben Nye because one is that they're less pigmented, which I know, like you think for value, you want more pigmented, but I like the translucency of the Ben Nye foundations. So they tend to be the three brands I like the most. So for creams, Maron and Ben Nye, and then for alcohol activated makeups, whether they be for airbrush or for in a palette, I do like EBA, European Body Arts.
Okay. Now those are for makeups. For working on props, do you have what type of paints do you like to use for doing details and props?
For props,
or masks, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't have much experience doing masks, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I don't have a good well of information to give you for masks because I know latex being flexible, that's a consideration. And if that's what you're talking about, like latex masks, and so
I think I've come across where people say, oh, as long as you water it down a little bit, you can use like craft paints in there. Do you not recommend doing that and just obviously buying airbrush paint?
No. So haunted houses, you're doing so much work and there's so much volume and there's so much overhead and so much labor. I tend to have to work really cheap on haunted houses. And believe it or not, movies, lower budget movies is very similar to that you have to find cheaper ways to do stuff. So I can't tell you how many mist tint house paints I've used for props because I can buy the mist tints cheaper. And them being latex based, usually are flexible enough even for a latex and foam prop. And if I'm watering down, let's say another cheap acrylic paint is just like go to Michael's and buy the basic brand. You can buy that like in bigger tubes than the more expensive stuff, and they're fairly cheap. I think Walmart carries them as well. So a lot of what I do with haunted house props will be mist-tinted paints, house paints, latex-based.
Like interior, not exterior?
Interior, if it's a prop, I'm not usually concerned.
Okay.
Exterior or interior paints actually hold up pretty well for exterior props because most of that stuff isn't out all year. It's not like your house being rained on and snowed on and all of that. It's like a prop might be out for a month if you're, a haunted house, maybe a month and a half.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a home haunt, it might only be out for a week, So when you consider that week times 52 weeks in a year, that's, 52 years to get up to the same amount of time outside. So I tend to gravitate that way. It's so much cheaper. It lasts long enough, especially if it's something worth putting a finish coat on. Then it's like you can get like I'll buy some water-based polyurethanes, and that will spend money on for things that have to last a little bit longer. So you can coat things in that, and that seems to have some flexibility to it. And you can water them down and put it on in coats. And I've even gotten house paint through an airbrush by watering it down to a consistency where I can still use it.
Yeah. Is there a ratio that you think?
I don't know that I have a real ratio for that. I know for makeups, it's about close to 60-40, 60% makeup, 40% water. Like if you're buying like Maron liquid makeup to put through an airbrush. I know that ratio because I do it all the time. Unfortunately, with the props, I don't do it quite as much, so I figure it out each time. And plus, when I look at like the house paints that we have, because we have like a whole closet full of them, and some of them have been sitting for a year or two because we're using mist tints, so they get thicker. So I don't have like a ratio to give you for that.
Okay.
I want to say the acrylic paints, though, like the basics, is probably similar to the makeup. If it's new and coming out of the tube, it's probably close to 60-40. Maybe 50-50 if it's a little thicker,
Listen to part 2 of Baker's conversation with Shawn Sieger on our next installment of Hauntcast. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, follow, and recommend Hauntcast to all of your haunt and Halloween friends. Until next time, stay scary.
I'm going now. And heaven help you.